To another immersive deep dive. Today we're unlocking the complexities and the really rich history of Algeria. It's Africa's largest country, you know. You've sent us a fascinating stack of articles, research, your own notes, and, well, our mission is to distill the essential insights for you.
That's right. We're going to try and guide you through Algeria's earliest foundations. It's, well, frankly, tumultuous path to nationhood.
Yeah.
We'll look at its evolving political landscape, the economic realities, its incredible, though often overlooked, tourism potential.
Definitely overlooked.
Its vibrant cultural tapestry, and the significant challenges it faces today. That includes critical majority and minority relations, and maybe where it's heading in the future.
So think of this as your express route to a more nuanced understanding of a country that really defies simple categorization. We'll be uncovering some surprising facts, those aha moments. Yeah, hopefully ensuring you walk away genuinely well-informed, but without feeling, overwhelmed by just tons of information. So let's kick off this captivating journey.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this journey way, way back. Algeria's ancient roots and its, well, truly turbulent founding. This land has been a crucible of human activity for millennia.
It really has.
When we talk deep history here, we're referring to evidence of human habitation stretching back, an astonishing 2 million years. Some of the oldest sites in North Africa are right here.
It's pretty incredible, a testament to the region's enduring appeal, its strategic location. A particularly striking example of this ancient human presence is the Capsian culture.
Right, the Capsians.
They thrived here from around 10,000 to 6,000 BCE. And what's fascinating about them is, their advanced microlithic tools, the really distinctive art found in rock shelters.
Those famous rock paintings.
Yeah, exactly. And sophisticated burial sites, too, which suggests a pretty well-developed, settled society even way back then. These early inhabitants, they laid the foundation for the indigenous peoples who've called this land home for thousands of years. The Berber or Amazigh peoples.
And the Amazigh identity, it's not just part of Algeria's heritage. It feels absolutely fundamental.
Oh, completely.
Their language, Tamazight, their distinct cultural traditions, they've persisted through countless invasions, empires. It's like this deep undercurrent shaping everything, even today, right? Local customs, national debates. Their resilience is just remarkable.
Absolutely. So following these indigenous foundations, the region became a real crossroads for various maritime powers. By around 1000 BCE, you see the arrival of Phoenician traders.
The sailors.
Exactly. They established crucial port cities along the coast. Hippo Regius, that's modern-day Annaba, and of course the powerful city of Carthage over in what's now Tunisia. But it exerted huge influence over the Algerian coastline.
And these ports weren't just for trade, were they?
No, not at all. They were conduits for new ideas, technologies, goods. They fundamentally shaped coastal development, pulling the region into that wider Mediterranean economic and cultural sphere.
That deep maritime connection definitely set the stage. And then, after Carthage finally fell to Rome, northern Algeria became a vital part of the Roman Empire.
Right, and this was a period of, significant prosperity, urbanization. Roman cities like Timgad and Jamila, both UNESCO World Heritage Sites, now they really flourished.
You can still see it today, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. When you visit Timgad, you can literally walk through its grand arches, see the forum, the theater, even a library. You get a real sense of sophisticated urban planning.
Wow.
Jamila has equally impressive mosaics, basilicas. These ruins aren't just old stones. They tell a vivid story of Roman influence, not just military control, but Latin, Roman law, new farming techniques like olive oil production. It transformed the landscape, the economy.
But empires fall, Rome declined, and northern Algeria saw these successive, maybe briefer periods under Vandal rule than the Byzantine Empire.
Right, 5th century Vandals, 6th century Byzantines, each left their own mark, even if sometimes it feels a bit ephemeral compared to Rome or what came next.
And what came next was perhaps the most profound transformation.
Yeah.
The 7th century Arab-Muslim conquest.
Huge, yeah.
This wasn't just a military victory, it was a massive societal upheaval. Widespread adoption of Islam, the Arabic language. But what's truly fascinating, you said, is how Islam didn't just replace things, it blended.
Exactly. It uniquely blended with and enriched the pre-existing Berber cultures. This created a really distinctive Algerian Islamic identity that you still see today.
And you see this fusion in the powerful Berber Muslim dynasties that emerged later.
Precisely, like the Zirids in the 10th century and later the Almohads in the 12th. The Almohads especially built this vast empire across North Africa and into Spain and Andalusia. It shows the incredible political and cultural dynamism of these Berber kingdoms. Their architecture, their intellectual contributions were immense, a lasting legacy.
Okay, so moving forward a few centuries into the 16th century, Algeria, or at least a big chunk of it, becomes part of the Ottoman Empire.
This led to the establishment of the Regency of Algiers. Now, while it was nominally part of the Ottoman world, it enjoyed a remarkable degree of autonomy.
Like its own little state almost.
Pretty much. Governed by local days, it had its own formidable navy, its own diplomatic relations. It acted very independently.
And this brings us to something pretty notorious, right? The piracy or corsair activity.
Oh yes, the Barbary corsairs. Algiers became infamous for this across the Mediterranean. And it wasn't just random raiding, it was quite sophisticated, almost state-sanctioned piracy.
A tool of statecraft, really.
In a way, yes. They targeted European shipping, seized goods, captured people for ransom or servitude. This generated huge wealth for the Regency, funded that powerful navy, and actually gave Algiers significant maritime power. It allowed them to maintain autonomy, often dictating terms to European states through treaties and tributes. It really set them apart.
But that period of maritime power, it ultimately attracted a new and undeniably brutal chapter. The French.
The French colonial period, yes. The invasion of 1830 marked the start of over 130 years of French colonization. And from the outset, it was profoundly brutal. A systematic effort to dismantle Algerian society and culture.
The oppression was just pervasive, wasn't it?
Absolutely systematic. The French colonial administration engaged in widespread land expropriation from Algerians. They used coercive legal tricks like the Senatus Consult of 1863, forcing privatization of communal lands, or the cantonment policy, pushing indigenous people onto smaller, worse land.
Exactly. It subjected Algerians to a separate, inferior legal system, denied basic civil liberties, imposed collective punishments. It was deeply discriminatory.
And beyond the land and the law, there was this deliberate cultural marginalization, too. Oh, very deliberate. Arabic, the majority language, was suppressed in favor of French. Islamic education, traditional institutions systematically undermined. It was a comprehensive attempt to either assimilate or just subjugate the Algerian identity.
But resistance never really stopped, did it?
Yeah.
Despite the overwhelming force.
No, it emerged almost immediately and never truly ceased. You had iconic leaders like Emir Abdelkader in the mid-19th century. He led this prolonged, highly organized armed resistance against French control for over 15 years.
Quite a figure.
Absolutely. His tenacity, military skill, moral authority, it showed the unwavering determination of Algerians to fight for sovereignty. And these decades of struggle, both armed resistance and just everyday defiance, they solidified these deep grievances that eventually exploded into the Algerian War of Independence in 1954.
And what a war that was.
Yeah.
Truly one of the bloodiest, most brutal decolonization conflicts of the 20th century.
The intensity was immense. Widespread atrocities on both sides, torture, mass displacement, bombings, horrific.
So what does this all mean for the nation? The human cost. It's just staggering. Estimates of over 1 million Algerians killed, out of a population of maybe 9 million then.
It's a devastating figure. It left profound, indelible scars on the nation, impacting generations, shaping the post-colonial psyche in ways that, resonate even today.
A truly foundational but incredibly harrowing experience.
It was, and that brutal conflict finally ended with independence on July 5, 1962, after the Evian Accords. A moment of undeniable euphoria, obviously, a triumph against huge odds, but like you said, steeped in profound, deep scars that continue to influence Algeria's challenges afterwards.
What an intense history. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about Algeria's political system. From that strange colonial setup right up to today. Under France, Algeria was technically part of France, right? Not just a colony?
That was the paradox, yes. Considered part of metropolitan France, but the rights were completely unequal. European settlers, the colons, had full French citizenship, immense privileges.
While most Algerians lived under the Code de l'Indigène. No real rights, no political participation.
Exactly. It was built on systematic inequality. And French authorities used harsh, often brutal repression to crush any dissent. Absolute control.
So genuine political expression for Algerians was basically impossible.
Pretty much. Then came independence in 1962. The new nation adopted a single-party socialist system dominated by the National Liberation Front, the FLN. the movement that led the war.
Which immediately set a specific political and ideological path. Unity, anti-imperialism, state-led development.
Right. Ahmed Ben Bella was the first president, but his time was short, only 3 years.
Yeah, overthrown in 65 by Houari Boumediene, his defense minister, which kind of reveals the military's influence early on.
Absolutely. The military has always been a major player. Boumediene then ruled as a military-backed strongman for over a decade. His policies were all about centralized planning, sweeping agrarian reform, focus on heavy industry.
And it's fascinating how his choices really set Algeria's course for decades, economically and politically.
Definitely. His vision was this independent, powerful socialist state. Centralized planning meant the state controlled almost everything, pouring resources into huge projects, sometimes inefficient ones like the El Hadjar steel complex or state factories.
And the agrarian reform.
Aimed to redistribute land to peasants. But implementation was bureaucratic, faced resistance, had mixed results. These choices, while maybe driven by nationalist ideals, fostered a kind of dependency on the state, stifled private initiative, even after later reforms.
So after Boumediene died in 78, Chadli Benjidi took over. He initiated some modest economic liberalization.
A slight shift.
A slight shift, yes. But political liberalization was resisted until the late 80s. Then, massive public pressure, fueled by economic problems, a growing youth population, forced significant reforms.
Leading to the 1989 Constitution, legalizing multiple parties. A brief moment of openness.
Brief but vibrant. But this raises that crucial, haunting question. What led to the devastating civil war?
The canceled elections. Exactly. Things went dark with the cancellation of the 1991 multi-party elections. The Islamist Party, the FIS, Islamic Salvation Front, had gained huge popular support partly due to social issues, disillusionment with the FLN, and they won the first round decisively.
And the military feared an Islamist takeover.
They did, so they intervened, canceled the second round, and that sparked the decade-long civil war. The Black Decade.
An unimaginable trauma.
Yeah.
The government versus Islamist armed groups, widespread violence, massacres, civilians targeted.
A brutal toll, up to 200,000 people killed. It left this profound impact, this deep distrust between the people and the rulers, and it empowered the military even more.
The scars of the Black Decade are still there, influencing everything.
Absolutely. So since then, Algeria technically has a multi-party system. Lots of parties exist. But in practice, the military and security services, le pouvoir, the power as they're often called, they retain immense influence behind the scenes.
Over key decisions, appointments, resources.
Right. It's critical to understand that dynamic. It's an enduring legacy of that whole period, especially the Civil War.
Which brings us to Abdelaziz Bouteflika, 2 decades in power, 1999 to 2019.
His reign started with relative stability, reconciliation after the war, helped by high oil prices. But it was also marked by, well, persistent corruption, weakening state institutions outside the military, and increasing repression.
And then came 2019, the Hirak movement. That was something else.
Truly pivotal. When Bouteflika announced he'd seek a 5th term despite being gravely ill, these massive, unprecedented protests erupted.
Mostly peaceful, leaderless, bringing everyone together.
Exactly. Youth, women, professionals, all social strata, united by this deep desire for real systemic reform and military dominance corruption, the old guard. The sheer scale and persistence forced Bouteflika's resignation, a powerful display of popular demand for change.
The Hirak's impact was huge. Now, Abdelmadjid Tebboune is president, elected late 2019 amid those ongoing protests. He's made some constitutional changes.
But many critics, and the Hirak movement itself, argue the system is still heavily controlled by the military establishment. Limited, genuine democracy. The perception is the deep state remains firmly in charge despite new faces.
So if you connect it all up, Algeria's politics seem like this continuous struggle, shaped by colonialism, authoritarianism, civil war, and this constant tension between popular demands and entrenched power.
That's a good way to put it. A complex, ongoing story of a nation trying to find its path, carrying these historical burdens while facing new aspirations.
Okay, let's turn now to Algeria's economic journey. From that exploitative colonial past to its hydrocarbon-dependent present. Under French rule, the economy was, well, designed almost exclusively to benefit France.
Right. Vast tracts of the best land were seized for settler farming, vineyards, cereals, turning Algeria into this economic appendage for France.
Exporting raw materials, farm produce.
Exactly. Leading to profoundly unequal prosperity. The wine and cereal farming boomed for export, while most Algerians were poor peasants, working land that used to be theirs, or struggling on marginalized plots. Zero share in the boom. Classic colonial extraction.
So after independence, a big pivot, state-led socialist model, and that pivotal moment in 1971, nationalizing oil and gas.
Absolutely pivotal under Boumediene. Taking control from French and other foreign companies, that instantly made hydrocarbons, oil and natural gas, the absolute backbone of the economy, seen as a tool for economic sovereignty.
And the government pursued big goals, heavy industry, agrarian reforms.
Ambitious goals, yeah. But they yielded mixed results. Massive state investments went into huge projects, steel, petrochemicals, factories, trying to build an industrial base. But often they suffered from inefficiency, mismanagement, lack of skilled labor.
And the agrarian reforms, similar story.
Kind of. Aimed to break up colonial estates, redistribute land, but faced bureaucratic hurdles, didn't always boost productivity as intended. The centralized planning often struggled to adapt or connect effectively with global markets.
And that reliance on hydrocarbons, as you said, proved to be a double-edged sword.
Definitely. In the 1980s, when oil prices crashed, it was a severe shock. Plunged Algeria into debt, fiscal crisis.
And that wasn't just financial, right? It fueled the social unrest.
Directly. The riots in the late 80s over basics, unemployment, that economic crisis fed right into the political openings, and then, tragically, the Civil War. A stark reminder of how linked economics and stability are.
So during and after the war, the government tried some limited economic liberalization.
A little bit, yeah. Tried to attract some foreign investment, privatize a few state companies, but even then, hydrocarbons remained dominant. High oil revenues often insulated the state from needing deeper reforms.
And that dominance defines the economy today still. Over 90% of export revenues, huge chunk of government income, still a major gas supplier to Europe.
Especially now with geopolitical shifts, yes. But it's a huge vulnerability. When prices drop, budgets suffer massively. Austerity hits, public services suffer. Underscores the critical, urgent need for diversification.
Have attempts to diversify worked? Agriculture, manufacturing, renewables?
There have been attempts, yes. But results have been slow, often falling short of targets, and the economy faces these persistent social issues fueling frustration. High unemployment, especially youth unemployment, often over 25% for under 30s.
Wow.
Plus ongoing inflation, housing shortages. These issues hit hard, made worse by a system that hasn't really delivered social equity for many.
And corruption is still a big problem.
A long-standing, deeply entrenched problem. Major scandals surface regularly, especially during Bouteflika's time, involving top officials, state companies like Sonatrach, the oil giant. It erodes trust, scares off investment.
So the current government is under pressure. Reform subsidies, improve the business climate, attract investment, and make that shift away from hydrocarbons.
Huge pressure, especially as the world moves towards greener energy. Algeria actually has vast solar potential it could capitalize on.
So what's the bottom line for the economy? Potential is there.
Definitely. Potential for a more diverse, resilient economy. The land, young population, location, powerful assets. But unlocking it needs real structural reforms, political will to tackle vested interests, and stability. It's a tough but necessary transformation, crucial for the long term.
Now let's explore something fascinating and, as you said, largely untapped, Algeria's tourism potential. It feels vast, but historically underdeveloped compared to neighbors.
It really is vast. Africa's largest country, extraordinary geographic diversity. You've got stunning Mediterranean beaches, snow-capped Atlas Mountains, lush highlands, and then the immense, awe-inspiring Sahara, over 80% of the country.
So why underdeveloped? Political priorities after independence?
Partly, yes. The focus was heavily on heavy industry, state-controlled economy, not service sectors like tourism. So the infrastructure, investment, promotion, it wasn't consistently prioritized. Limited development.
And then the Civil War in the 90s.
Dealt a devastating blow. Severe security concerns, instability. It led to a virtual collapse of international tourism, ground to a halt for over a decade, isolated Algeria.
But since the early 2000s, with better security, there have been efforts to revive it.
Concerted efforts, yes. Recognizing its importance for jobs, diversification, and just showing the country's real identity. And the attractions are genuinely world-class. The Roman ruins, Timgad, Jamila, vivid glimpses into ancient history.
Walking through an amphitheater where thousands watch shows.
Incredible. Exactly, or admiring Jamila's mosaics. And beyond Rome, significant Islamic heritage sites too, ancient mosques, Kasbahs.
Centuries of culture.
But the Sahara, that sounds like the really unique draw.
It truly is. Breathtaking. Otherworldly landscapes, places like Taslin Ager and the Hoggar Mountains, both UNESCO World Heritage Sites.
Taslin Ager has that famous rock art, thousands of years old, depicting life when the Sahara was green savanna. an open-air museum. And the Hoggar Mountains, dramatic volcanic peaks, unique rock formations, incredible trekking, experiencing Tuareg culture, unforgettable.
So with all that, what are the obstacles holding tourism back now?
Persistent obstacles, unfortunately. Infrastructure outside big cities is often poor. Limited quality hotels, underdeveloped transport, lack of facilities for international tourists.
And visas, bureaucracy.
Often restrictive visa processes, red tape. It deters travelers who might just choose easier destinations. And then there's fierce competition from Morocco, Tunisia. They have well-established tourism sectors, decades of experience.
But the government sees the potential. They're trying to fix things.
More effective marketing of Algeria's unique draws beyond just oil and gas.
So tourism is growing, but slowly. Mostly domestic for now.
Slowly growing internationally from a low base, yes. Domestic tourism is quite vibrant, Algerians exploring their own country. Foreign visitors still limited. But looking at the big picture, developing tourism could significantly help Algeria cut that hydrocarbon dependence, create jobs, and showcase its heritage. A long-term vision needs sustained effort.
Okay, let's dive into the heart of Algeria. Its culture, a rich tapestry, right? Woven from millennia of influences. Language seems absolutely central.
Central and often debated. Arabic is official, mainly Algerian Arabic with its own dialects. And significantly, Tamazight Berber recognized as national and official in 2016, a crucial step after years of campaigning.
So many Algerians are bilingual or trilingual, Arabic, Tamazight, French.
Often, yes. And French remains widely used, education, business, media. The colonial legacy. For many, it's a lingua franca, especially in cities. A fascinating linguistic mosaic.
And the traditions are incredibly diverse tied to these roots. Berber heritage is strong, especially in Kabylie.
Very strong and visible there, yes. The Kabyle people maintain distinct practices, also in parts of the Sahara with communities like the Tuareg. And this rich heritage flows into Algeria's amazing traditional music styles.
The music scene sounds incredible. Chabi, Rai.
You've got Chabi, popular urban folk from Algiers, poetic lyrics, blending Andalusian and Berber rhythms, and then Rai, the global phenomenon from Iran.
Yeah, Rai really broke through internationally.
Totally, blending traditional Bedouin music with Western pop, rock, jazz. Artists like Cheb Khaled, Cheb Mami, Vandal, they became huge stars in the 80s and 90s. What's fascinating is how it gained global fame despite initial pushback in Algeria, becoming the symbol of cultural expression, youth rebellion.
And beyond Rai.
Traditional Kabyle songs, often about identity, homeland, and the evocative Tuareg music from the desert hypnotic rhythms, poignant lyrics, really powerful stuff.
The music is clearly huge.
Uh-huh.
And Islam's role, deeply rooted.
Deeply rooted in daily life, core part of identity. Overwhelmingly Sunni Muslim. Holidays like Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha are huge celebrations. Family, food, prayers. But traditions vary regionally too, reflecting local customs, history, even Sufi influences. Adds richness.
And we absolutely have to talk about the food.
Cannot forget the food. Algerian cuisine is a pillar. Rich, hearty, incredibly flavorful. Reflects Berber, Arab, Ottoman, French influences.
Couscous,
A
obviously.
national dish, many would say, served with amazing meat and vegetable stews, flavorful tagines, slow-cooked, warming torba soup, and the pastries, macroud with dates and honey, brioche. It's incredible. Speaks volumes about history, agriculture, influences.
Sounds amazing. And modern life, a blend of old and new.
A fascinating blend. Cities like Algiers, Iran, Constantine are bustling. Colonial architecture next to modern buildings, busy markets, lively cafes, and a really dynamic youth culture, music, cinema, social media, global trends, big youth population, real energy.
But there are tensions too. Tradition versus modernity. Language debates.
Definitely. Ongoing debates. Language roles, Arabic, Tamazight, French, still lively, often political. The push and pull between tradition and modernity, rural versus urban, religious conservatism versus secularism. It's an ongoing conversation in society, expressed through art, literature, public discourse.
But despite these complexities, there's a strong shared national identity.
Absolutely. Undeniable. Fiercely forged through that long struggle against colonialism, a rich shared history of resilience. It's a powerful, unifying force.
Finally, let's look at the critical challenges Algeria faces today and its future outlook, including those complex majority-minority dynamics. Economically, the challenges are big. High youth unemployment is still critical.
A major concern, yes. Leading to frustration, brain drain, and the heavy reliance on oil and gas, the vulnerability to price swings. the urgent need for real, broad-based diversification.
Plus ongoing social demands, housing, education services.
Right, which the state struggles to deliver consistently due to fluctuating revenues and efficiencies.
Politically, substantial hurdles remain. Popular demands for genuine democracy, transparency, accountability.
The Hirak movement showed that clearly, that broad desire for systemic change, ending military dominance. But as we said, the system, le pouvoir, seems resistant to deep reform, an uphill battle for real participatory democracy.
Security is also part of the picture. Lingering militant threats, regional instability.
While the Civil War ended, sporadic attacks by remnant groups have happened, and regional instability, especially in the Sahel to the south, is a continuing concern. Requires significant military spending, vigilance along vast borders, resources diverted from development.
And internally, those majority-minority relations.
Yeah.
Incredibly important. Most Algerians identify as Arab Berber, Sunni Muslim. But within that,
Important minority issues. The Amazigh or Berber communities, their long struggle for recognition of language, culture, rights.
there's been progress, right? Tamazigh's official now.
Significant progress, yes. Tamazight taught in schools. But tensions remain over cultural autonomy, full implementation of language policy, political representation, especially for groups like the Kabyles.
And the Tuareg in the south.
Often feel economically, politically marginalized, struggling for recognition of their specific needs, land rights in those vast desert regions where resource extraction is happening.
And smaller communities too. Sahrawi refugees, sub-Saharan migrants.
Right, all part of the complex picture. Which raises that key question for the future. How does Algeria successfully balance national unity with its rich cultural, linguistic, ethnic diversity? A continuing complex challenge. Needs dialogue, inclusive policies, real representation.
So looking ahead, what are Algeria's key assets?
Major assets. A young, dynamic population, strategic location bridging Africa, the Middle East, Europe, vast natural resources, even beyond hydrocarbons, and that incredibly rich, diverse cultural heritage, powerful foundations.
But unlocking that potential requires
Sustained political reform addressing demands for transparency, participation, aggressive economic diversification, creating real jobs, lessening oil dependence, genuine social inclusion for everyone, and significantly better governance combating corruption, improving public services.
tall order.
A very tall order. Many Algerians hope for a more open, prosperous, equitable future, one that finally realizes the full promise of independence. But the path forward demands difficult choices, sustained effort, confronting entrenched challenges. It's a nation at a crucial juncture.
Well, that brings us towards the end of today's deep dive into Algeria. From its ancient past through colonization, independence, authoritarianism, the hopes of Iraq. Algeria's story is really one of resilience, struggle, ongoing change.
It is a country of breathtaking landscapes, rich traditions, vibrant people, facing real challenges, absolutely, but also holding vast, untapped promise if it can navigate the complexities of its past and present.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to mull over. Given Algeria's profound experiences with both immense resource wealth and deep internal conflicts, what lessons might its ongoing journey offer other nations striving for true self-determination, stability, and equitable development in our rapidly changing world?
Something to definitely think about.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has helped you understand Algeria in a new, perhaps more nuanced way.